Most people know very little about space junk. Most people would be really surprised if you told them that there were 200 million pieces of space junk under 1 centimetre in diameter surrounding the Earth, as close as 160 kilometres away. As a sound artist, I'm really interested in things that don't make sound, because for me, they provide this amazing opportunity to invent a voice for things. So I was really interested in transforming space debris into sound so that you can actually feel it somehow. There's this delicious paradox about space debris, which is that it's silent because it exists in a vacuum. So it's full of energy, travelling at 4 miles a second, 27,000 kilometres an hour, and none of it makes any noise.
I came across this story of Piers Sellers, an astronaut who dropped his spatula in space, which became a bit of space junk. And I found this a really provocative image, a mundane kind of kitchen instrument orbiting Earth dangerously. Very quickly, kind of after that, found out that there was actually 100 million bits of space junk orbiting Earth, and that this represented a significant contemporary crisis for people working in space. So I talked to Nick, and as a sound artist, he was instantly fascinated with how could he give voice to these bits of junk. And so between us, we conceptualized Project Adrift, which was made up of 3 components. Watch, a short film called Adrift that explores the contradictions of this world. Listen, Nick's instrument, Machine 9, and Adopt, where we selected 3 bits of junk, space junk, which would tweet you live as they orbited Earth.
Rather than space debris being something about information, a cognitive process, I wanted it to be a sensory one, because that's how I kind of know things are real on Earth, by touching them and feeling them and seeing them and hearing them and tasting them. I thought it was interesting to approach it from a much more abstract perspective. So I invited people to send me pieces of matter which they thought represented space debris, either because it looked like what they imagined space debris to look like, or maybe it represented something more poetic for them about space debris. Maybe it represented loneliness or human endeavour or technology. And then I actually recorded all of these items using film Foley techniques to generate sound from them. And those are the sounds which represent space debris.
Initially, there was, we sort of had a rough idea of the concept and what we'd ideally like the machine to do, but then it was a case of thinking, okay, so how many motors do we need to make this? The conversation turned into sketches, then into prototypes, and then the concept was slightly driven by feedback from our experiments. I think people have taken different views of the project from different angles. Some of them have got really into the space debris, some people have enjoyed the fact that it's an old-fashioned phonograph cylinder but sort of updated, and so different people have commented on really quite different sort of angles. Most projects I'm usually thinking of the few areas that it could be improved, but this one actually, this one went pretty well in the end, so I'm quite happy with this one.
This is the display, and it tells us everything about the debris that's overhead and what's controlling Machine 9. It tells us this is the debris data feed, so this is telling us how many pieces of debris are overhead right now and how many styluses are active. This tells us the debris sequence, so each piece of debris in turn comes up here with its name, its radar cross-section, so that's a kind of indication of its size, and its altitude. And then we see a total of the number of overhead objects right now. So there are 13 in the sky above us, and there have been 490 that have passed over since we switched the machine on. And this is a kind of visualization of that circle drawn in the sky. Every time a new piece of debris comes over, we get a flash, like a kind of constellation of stars, and that will visualize the number of pieces overhead. And then the thing I really love about the display is that every piece of debris that comes over gets associated with a randomly selected photograph of one of the pieces of Earth debris that I was sent, which generated the sound that you're hearing. So thinking about space debris and orbits and the need to kind of represent space debris as a physical sensation, all these things reminded me of vinyl, and it struck me that the phonograph is the most physical way of reproducing sound. You have the contact of the stylus on the surface of the record, and that's really, really tactile. So I came up with the idea of building a giant cylindrical phonograph inspired by Edison's original phonograph, which was a cylinder rather than a platter. What we ended up with was a 1.8 meter long aluminium cylinder with 1,000 sounds engraved along its surface, and then 8 motorized styluses that you can see here, each of which is responsible for 125 grooves. The sounds are graded from low frequency to high frequency. So as an instrument, it has a register of pitch. And this relates to the size of space debris. So when a tiny piece of space debris flies overhead, one of the styluses up this end will find a tiny high-pitched sound for it. And when a massive piece of space debris flies overhead, one of the styluses down this end will find a really deep, low sound for it. It's really amazing to be supported by a company who really appreciates that experimental sound work is important and requires support, and also to appreciate that the kind of approach to making work like this is not conventional, and neither is the sound, and to find that Bowers Wilkins embraces both those things is really fantastic. You really get a sense of this indeterminate composition which is being generated and composed live by a conductor, and in this case the conductor is space debris in orbit. It's completely unpredictable, and yet it's surprisingly composed and very beautiful at times, very moving, very apocalyptic at other times, but always really surprising.